Dear colleagues, dear students, we have today a special day in our School of International Relations, St. Petersburg State University, because we have a special guest with us. This is my vivid pleasure to welcome Dr. Lassины Zerbo, Executive Secretary of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization. Of course, we are looking forward for an interesting meeting, which is, supposed to be one of the series of meetings with our students and professors done by outstanding diplomats, specialists in international relations, experts from all over the world. Before we start, let me give a short information, a little bit more detailed information about our dear guest. Dr. Lassины Zerbo, who is now in the post of Executive Secretary of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization. He previously served as Director of the organization's International Data Center. Dr. Zerbo has been instrumental in cementing the CDPTO's position as the world's center of excellence for nuclear test ban verification, as well as in driving forward efforts towards the entry into force and universalization of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. In recognition of his work at the CDPTO and in the disarmament and nuclear proliferation field in general, Dr. Zerbo was awarded in 2013 Arms Control Person of the Year by the Arms Control Association, United States of America. In 2015, he became a commander of the National Order of Burkina Faso. He was also decorated with the Grand Cross in the Chilean Order of Bernardo O'Higgins in June 2016. In February 2017, Dr. Zerbo was awarded the Presidential Medal on the occasion of the 25th anniversary of Republic of Kazakhstan. In August 2017, Dr. Zerbo received special honorary citizenship of the city of Hiroshima. During his professional career, Dr. Zerbo has developed expertise ranging from scientific and technical competencies to results-based management and multilateral diplomacy. Dr. Zerbo served as co-chair of the World Economic Forum Global Agenda Council on Nuclear Security in the years 2012-2014. He is a member of think tanks on energy, science, technology, and development, and peace and security for Africa. So, dear colleagues, we understand, all of us, we understand to what extent we have a special guest today, outstanding diplomat, outstanding think tank. So, Dr. Zerbo, the floor is yours. If you don't mind, please follow to the
Yeah, okay. So good afternoon. It's Dobry din, I think. Dobry din. That's what I remember in Russia. It's Dobry din or Здравствуйте, Хорошо. But anyway, let me say that it's indeed a pleasure for me to be among you at this well-known university, the University of St. Petersburg State University, and it's with pride that I come here to give a lecture on non-proliferation. I want to thank the moderator. He said that I'm a distinguished diplomat, but I think I prefer to say that I'm a scientist lost in diplomacy. That's how I introduce myself, because diplomacy for me is something that I've learned on the job. But science is what I study, so I measure in science, in geophysics. So diplomacy is what I learn when I'm talking to you and exchanging with you guys. And so you help me to be a better diplomat every day I meet you. So I think that's quite good. And I understand I visited the museum of the university, and then I realized that President Putin has been in this university, and then you have a number of Nobel Prize, like 7 of them, including, I think I've seen as well that Prime Minister Medvedev was part. But for me as a scientist, what I saw was Mendeleev, because even from Burkina Faso, where I come from, we know the table of Mendeleev. But I didn't know that Mendeleev, when he was studying, he used to stand. He doesn't sit. The good thing is that when you sit, sometimes you can fall asleep. When you stand, you never fall asleep. That's probably why Mendeleev was such a good scientist. So maybe that's a message to you guys. So maybe we should all stand and then listen to each other, but I don't know. But that's what I found out a couple of minutes ago. But anyway, today my special thanks goes to Professor Kropachev, Rector of the University of St. Petersburg, Professor Novikova, who told me just now a personal story, why she's so attached to international relations and especially non-proliferation. She was living with her grandmother next to a place where Russia was conducting a nuclear test explosion at the time. So as well as Professor Pavlov and Associate Professor Maligina as well. So the Russian Federation has been a great supporter of the CTBT. And I think one example is that Thursday, I will have the honor and pleasure to see again Foreign Minister Lavrov. I think whenever I've come to Russia and whenever we've tried to seek a meeting with the Foreign Ministry, Foreign Minister Lavrov has always been kind to exchange with us, to talk about the CTBT, the progress about this treaty, and then its take in international affairs. And I think that's something that I want to mention. And often what I say, I tell people, because my French-speaking background comment that I say that la Russie est un bon élève du CTBT. It means that Russia is a good student of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. Why I say this? Because Russia has not only committed to the technical means of the treaty, but Russia had signed and ratified the CTBT long ago. The signature and ratification of Russia was important because Russia is among the P5 countries, nuclear weapon country known under the NPT. And Russia is indeed building all the technical means for the entry into force of the treaty and then for its verification mechanism. And that's something that is important. So whatever people say, whatever people hear, from my side, La Russie is a good student of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. So I'm sure if I ask you who knows a little bit more about the CTBT, I'm sure very few. If you didn't, you probably read a lot before I came. So I won't go into the detail about the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. As you know, before I became the executive secretary of this organization, I used to be the director of its International Data Center. The International Data Center is one of the components of the verification regime of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. You have the International Monitoring System, which is the set of international facilities around the globe. We talk about 337 facilities that are spread around the planet, including a station that detects earthquake. This is how we detect underground explosion from the DPRK, because it's the only country that carries nuclear test explosion this day. We have stations that are on surface that basically check the pressure waves of any noise that happen. We call them the infrasound station. We have stations that are underwater that basically check any explosion or any event that will happen under the ocean. And then we have the last component of the station. Those are the stations that suck the air and then to give the radionuclide nature of an event. When I talk about the radionuclide nature of an event, we talk about whether the verification regime of the CTBT and the organizational framework has the right to decide on the nature of an event. And this has been a challenge for us, a challenge because when an event happens, we have today, especially through young people like yourself, the challenge of giving you all the information. What you want is, you want us to tell you whether it's a nuclear test explosion or not. But it does take time to decide whether an event is a nuclear test explosion. You've seen in the DPRK in North Korea, they've had tests announced, and then they say we've carried a nuclear test explosion. But until you have the radionuclide sniff, the isotope that will give you the nature of an event, you cannot conclude for sure that it is a nuclear test explosion. We haven't had a case where people will simulate a nuclear test explosion just to show that they've done something and that they have the capability of developing nuclear weapon, but that could be a situation as well. But so far, if you look at the last tests in September, to date, we haven't had any consistent sniff of radioisotope that will give us the indication that, or give the member state the indication that we were dealing with a nuclear test explosion. So I'm just giving you this example to tell you that our role is to provide technical specification to the international community and to the state signatories for the national authority and the expert to make a decision whether it's a nuclear test explosion or not. So we basically tell you what is 1 + 1. So it's up to you to decide if it's 2, or if you think 1 + 1 is -2, that's your decision. But often if everybody comes and says that 1 + 1 is 2, we are all in agreement that we're dealing with a nuclear test explosion. That's basically what we do. So how this verification regime provides or help advance nuclear disarmament, that has been the challenge. A challenge because, as you know, we have 183 countries that have now signed the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty and 166 that have ratified the treaty. So why, with such a high number of countries that have gathered to say no and never to nuclear test explosion, this treaty is not in force yet? It's simply because this is the only treaty in multilateral diplomacy where there's a provision and a decision that a group of countries' ratification is absolutely necessary for its entry into force. And those are 44 countries. And why 44? Because at the time of the negotiation, people assume that the 44 countries cited in the treaty are the one that could be in a position to develop nuclear weapon or had the ambition to develop nuclear technology and therefore be in a position one day to develop nuclear weapon. So those 44 countries were decided that it was decided that their ratification is absolutely necessary for the entry into force of the CTBT. So what does it mean? It means that with the 166, even if we had 44 of those countries that have ratified, the treaty will be in force with the 44 countries. But unfortunately, among the 44 countries, even if we have 166 ratification, there are 8 of those countries that have not yet ratified. Russia has done its part. France has done its part. UK has done its part. Among the P5 countries, the nuclear weapon countries. The 8 countries are the United States, China, India, Pakistan, and the DPRK, and Israel, Egypt, and Iran. Those are the 8 countries. If you take the 8 countries, 5 of them have signed the treaty. And that is Iran, Israel, Egypt, China, and the United States. Those 5 have signed the treaty, and their ratification is pending. Those who have not even signed the treaty among the 44 are India, Pakistan, and the DPRK. But among those 3, Pakistan is probably the closest to getting into this treaty because Pakistan is at least an observer to the treaty. And India could be de facto an observer because every country during the negotiation where it is decided that the country will host an international monitoring facility is a de facto observer to the treaty. But that's something that we yet to discuss and then to agree with India, but that's another challenge that we have. Having said this, we're trying hard to work with all those 8 countries to secure their signature or ratification for the entry into force of the CTBT. Often people tell me, but Mr. Zerbo, how do you think this treaty will ever enter into force? I mean, my answer to this, if I didn't think it would, I don't think I would even run for executive secretary of the organization. Because when you come as a head of an organization, it's because you hope that you'll be able to advance the cause of the treaty or the cause of the organization that you head. And this is why I'm more than ever passionate about what I do and what the team of people that I have around me are working for, because we believe that if we don't have this treaty in force now, you guys, the future diplomat and future policymaker that you are, will make sure this treaty enter into force. Why? Because when you're young, you have no limitation. You try to do the impossible. Only young people can do the impossible. And because the CTBT seemed to be an impossible mission, we count on you as young people to be able to help advance this treaty. And this is why I've initiated the group of the youth group for the CTBT to try and bridge the gap with what I had before, the group of eminent persons, where we have those who have known the negotiation of the treaty and many of the multilateral diplomacy treaties, and those who will leave that world where those treaties are effective. And those guys are you. Because with hope, there is no way we can get moving on so many treaties that are pending, like the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, the Fissile Material Cut-off Treaty, that will remain in limbo for so many years. We have a Chemical Weapon Convention, a kind of a Biological Weapon Convention. The Fissile Material Treaty, Cut-off Treaty, and the CTBT are the ones that are yet to be implemented and effective, so that we have a full scope of non-proliferation and disarmament that will help for the stability of this world. And you have to be part of it. And you are in the right field, because if you choose to be in international relation, in international diplomacy, you are in the right place. You are in the right place because our world is so uncertain today. And often, people choose to go in the field of study based on what is happening around them. I was using the case of Professor Irina Nico just now. She was influenced by the tests in the vicinity of where she used to live. But you guys are more influenced by what's happening right now, because whether you want or not, you hear every day the GCPOA, you hear every day North Korea, you hear every day war in this part of the world, you hear every day negotiations that are not bearing fruit. And what you say to yourself, you know, in your subconscious, you say to yourself, what can I do to help what's happening in the global picture in this world? And that's what leads you to choosing international relations, because you want to be part of something that can make a different world, a better world for you and then for the future generation. So you are in the right place. I wasn't in the right place, but I was in the right place at my time, because I chose to go in mining because there was a lot of development, research and development to look for deposit in Africa the time I finished geophysics. But then I decided to do something else, because I wanted to be part of global issues. And that's how I applied for the position at the CTBT, found myself as director of the International Data Center, and then now running around and then try to advocate for a treaty that is important for non-proliferation and disarmament. And that leads me to the next point. How does CTBT contribute to non-proliferation and disarmament? Many people will tell you, hardly. Why hardly? Because they say, but who is doing testing today? Only North Korea. But only North Korea is doing today. You shouldn't forget that it's probably because the CTBT exists and its international monitoring system. If we didn't have a verification mechanism that makes it difficult for any country to do any tests that will go undetected, we would have many countries that will try and develop nuclear weapon by testing. It's because the CTBT kicked in 1996. If we had a graph of the number of tests that was done prior to this, we had 2,000 nuclear test explosions that were carried before they opened for signature of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. And since then, we had the few tests in 98 by India and Pakistan, and then after that, in this 21st century, only DPRK with the 6 tests that we heard about. But the 6 tests, we can say they're small in number, but they're too many in what they represent today in the international community. We shouldn't have any tests. Nuclear test explosion should be of history. If you face and then see the consequence of nuclear test explosion, I've been to Kazakhstan, I've been to Semipalatinsk, I've been to Hiroshima as well, and Nagasaki. There we talk about the use of nuclear weapon. But if you see the effect of nuclear test explosion in environment, in humanity, I think you realize that our world should be considered too civilized for any nuclear test explosion to be of today. We have to put that back in history. And to put that back in history, we need a verification mechanism like the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. We cannot work on non-proliferation. The non-proliferation regime needs a verification mechanism. And the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty is and should remain part of that. And that's why it's important to bring this treaty into force. It's important to keep this treaty lined up and key of the non-proliferation treaty in general. Now that leads me to something that you've heard recently, which is the prohibition on nuclear weapons. You've heard the Nobel Peace Prize we're giving to ICAN, which is a movement that basically tried to push for the total elimination of nuclear weapons. But I'm often asking myself, if you look at the Comprehensive Test Ban, we talk about testing. We're not even talking about the weapon itself and its use. So if we can't get testing completely eliminated, how do you think it will be easy to get nuclear weapon out of this planet if we don't have the contribution of the nuclear weapon countries? There's a prohibition treaty that was adopted and that now enters in force because 50 countries have ratified this treaty. But this treaty is without the contribution and the buy-in of the nuclear weapon countries. None of the 5 official nuclear weapon countries are part of it. And on top of that, you don't have India, Pakistan, Israel that are part of this treaty. North Korea is out of any international agreement anyway. So this is a difficulty that I see, not only as head of the organization, the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, but as a layman as well. When I step back and look at our environment, I say to myself, often when I was a kid and then I go to a garden and then I go to where I'm looking for mangoes or any fruit in the forest, what you do, you look for the fruit that are ripe, those who are ready, and those who are close to you. I see the CTBT as one of the closest fruits to my head, because when you're a little boy, you can't jump. If you can't climb the tree, what you want is a fruit that you can catch. And the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty is one of those ripe and ready fruit that are close to our head and that we should grab. We grab the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty so that we can move for other stronger arms control treaties. And I'm going to tell you a small story. You know, when you are a toddler, when you come as a baby, you flat on your bed, and then you sit. After 6 months, they say, my baby is sitting, and then the parents are applauding, and then they're very happy. And a couple of weeks later, you start crawling, okay? And then a month or 2 later, you start standing, and after when you are 1 year old, you walk. But often girls walk before men, because girls are faster. They have a faster brain than men. That's why they walk before men. But you will realize that some kids jump from sitting to walking. They don't crawl. So in my part of the world, when they do that, they force them to crawl, because they say if you walk without crawling, you won't have solid legs. So I try to use this into non-proliferation and disarmament. If you get a prohibition treaty without the entry into force of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty and an agreement on the fissile material cut-off treaty, you may have it, but it won't be strong enough. So the crawling part is what the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty and other arms control treaty are. And that's why we need you to help us to get this treaty in force, so that whatever we build for the future, we make it strong and sustainable for the international community. And this is what we need. We need strong treaty, we need sustainable treaty, we need sustainable stability, we need sustainable peace. When I say sustainable stability, it sounds like a pleonasm, but what I mean is that we need something that is strong and that can keep us all together. And the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty can help achieve this in non-proliferation and disarmament. And this is why I think being here, when they say you have a special guest, I would say I have a special student. I have a special student because in talking to you, you give me that energy and you give me that look, and then we build that complicity and that partnership that can keep us all moving towards contributing to global peace and stability. And that's why it's so great to be among you, and so great to talk to you, so great to listen to you, and then better to work together as we move forward to contribute better and better to international peace and stability. So I've mentioned the entry into force of the CTBT. That sounds a bit long and difficult to achieve. People often tell me, how can we get those 8 countries to ratify? I'm sure if I ask any of you, you'll say, why don't you bring them in one room and then get them to ratify at the same time? That's the easiest thing, isn't it? Because as young policy makers, you would like to bring India, Pakistan, China, United States, and then you lock the room, you say, until you ratify, you don't come out. So that would be the easiest thing to do. Because when I talk to school kids, that's what they tell me. And I wish I could do that. And that's probably my dream, to be able to have people in one room and then basically have them sign and ratify treaties so that we can move forward. But you know, and you know already, that the world is far more complicated than this. People have, domestic issues that go beyond beyond international agreement. I'll give you an example. I met yesterday the Speaker of the Parliament of Iran, Professor Larijani, a very humble and a very charming and a man full of wisdom. I spent about half an hour discussion with him, and we're talking about Iran and Iran's ratification of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. This is what he told me. He said, look, Mr. Zerbo, we have the JCPOA, which is the Joint Consultative Plan of Action, the Iran deal. You've all heard about the Iran deal. The Iran deal was negotiated for many years and agreed upon, but the P5+1, or EU 3+3, whatever you put yourself, whether you call it from Europe or you call it from the perspective of the international community. So, it's not a bilateral agreement. The Iran deal is an international agreement because it includes Europe, it includes Russia, it includes the United States, it includes China, and it includes the Middle East as well. So here's an agreement that was secured, and an agreement that was given to an international organization, the International Atomic Energy Agency, to consider its implementation, to see how Iran can be compliant with the Iran deal or with the Joint Consultative Plan of Action. And you've heard recently the head of the organization, the sister organization, the International Atomic Energy Agency, Amano, who said that they can certify that Iran complies with the Joint Consultative Plan of Action. But among the 5+1, one country has not certified this deal. And the other 5 countries are saying, no, we believe because we follow. And that's why Professor Larijani was telling me today, he said, what's the role of international organization if an agreement that is certified as compliant by international community, by international organization, cannot be taken by the international community as such and then to move on. And this is putting at risk not only multilateral diplomacy, but also the role of international organizations. It means if an international organization can come and then say, this we certify based on what was agreed by all the international community that it is our job. We're saying that this is true, that any country can come and say, no, we don't believe. Then how can we solve the problem of the DPRK? And that's the risk that media, expert, and policy makers like yourself will see. We talk about peaceful resolution of the North Korean issue. How do we go about to bring North Korea on the table of negotiation, to sign an agreement with them, and then they will say, oh, we believe this agreement is strong and that you will all abide by it and implement it and all be compliant with it. Because they will look and then say, hey, here's an agreement that you did a couple of years ago, but you don't believe in that agreement anymore. Why should I trust you? So I think we have to, with your help, to make sure that we support multilateral diplomacy, we support international organizations for them to be the conduit to implement what the international community agrees upon. And that's what is important. And that's why, because the Iran deal has been one of the only multilateral agreements in arms control and non-proliferation for the past decade, because after the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, you can look with glasses, you won't find any other arms control or non-proliferation agreement that has been dealt with and agreed upon. The Iran deal is one of them. And if you take too long to have something, it's like a couple. If a couple takes too long before they get a baby and a kid, when the kid comes, this is the best they can have. Not that every kid is not the best that a couple can see. But when you take long to have something, you understand and appreciate more than what you have so easily. Okay? And that's why anything that comes to the table that has been long due is something that we should treasure. So whether we agree or we don't agree, I, Lassiny Zerbo, as head of the international organization, that is the CTBT, what I want is that any agreement that we have can help the case of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty so that we can get as well this agreement in force and we can get it as universal as possible as we move towards establishing a peaceful, stable, and secure world for all of us. And this is what we need. And this is why we need you. Okay? We need you because today, with social media, the world has become so different and so fast. I'm not on Facebook, but I'm on Twitter. Because Twitter is more controllable than Facebook. Facebook is, you guys probably know Facebook better than anyone else. Facebook is I found it so crazy because you put everything, okay? But Twitter you control a little bit. And why I like Twitter is because you have to put your story and the message in 140 characters. I heard that now they wanted to put 250. I'm trying to write to them to say, no, don't do that, because then our brain will be slower and slower. They have to make 140. You work hard to send your message. And when you get your message, you get it right, because you want people to understand. So social media has become such a fast mean to pass messages that you are more demanding than the generation before you. And the generation that is coming after you will be more demanding. So we owe to each generation the work that we do that will help them to prepare a better world for the generations to come. And that's why we have to pass the baton. The way to pass the baton is to communicate, to educate, to work together, and then to put ourselves in a situation where our message is carried in a way where those who take it to move can run faster and achieve faster. And that's what I want you to do for me, the same way I did for the people before me. And this is how we can take that chain of command to achieving what our goal is and our dream is, a world free from nuclear weapon. Can we achieve that? Yes, we can. Yes, we can, because soon we'll realize that we don't need those type of arms, those type of weapons to feel secure. Because 40, 50, and 70 years ago, people felt that the only way you can be stable, the only way you can be secure in your corner is if you also have a nuclear weapon. Because you say, if I have a nuclear weapon, my neighbor knows that I'm powerful and he will never attack me. So, but we shouldn't look at it this way. We should look at a world that is completely different today, because you communicate through all means, and means that are much easier than what we knew 40 or 50 years ago. Communication should be the message and the conduit for us to not use muscles or use arm or use weapon to try and solve problems. There's no problem without a solution, and non-proliferation and disarmament should not be an exception to finding solution to this problem. And the only way to find solution is to be with you guys, and you guys to continue the study that you're doing in international relations. I understand that this class of international relations is more international than what it has been. You used to have the class in Russia, now you have it in English. You have students from, I guess, India, you have students from Algeria ahead, you have students from different countries, Syria, and then you have the course in English, because English is a common language to all of you. So as you learn English, how you communicate in English, and then you try to solve problems together, you bond in a way where you can only achieve the best for the next generation. And that is a beauty for your generation. I used to travel thousands of kilometers to go and look for a better way to be educated. I moved from Burkina Faso to go to France, from France to Canada, from Canada to the United States, in a much more difficult way than you guys. When I was going at school, when I was in France, I used to send a letter to my parents and wait 6 weeks, and sometimes 8 to 10 weeks before I get an answer. Today you send it and then they get it immediately. That's not my time. So your time is much better, and your time is more suitable to finding solution to difficult problems. And this is what I wanted to share with you today. I think I would love to have a more interactive discussion with you guys so that we can take how we can solve those issues together the best way possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, dear Dr. Zerbo. So, dear colleagues, dear students, we are passing now to the questions and answers session. Yes, we have responsible with the microphone. So please don't forget to introduce yourselves, please, before asking the question.
Daria Matashova, the second course bachelor. Dear Dr. Zerbo, I'd like to tell you thank you for your lecture, and I'd like you to answer the question about educational, science and technological programs, especially in the countries with emerging economies, which are supported and may be supplied by CTBTO. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I should have asked you, would you prefer to collect questions or to answer one by one? What would be? Okay, second question, please.
Second one.
Oh, the same person, okay.
And the second one, how does the cooperation in non-proliferation influence the soft power of the country?
Could you repeat, please, the last question? A little bit louder.
How does the cooperation in the non-proliferation world movement influence the soft power of definite countries like Russia, like your native country Burkina Faso, etc.?
For your question, I think the two questions go together. I think you had probably the same thought for both questions, but I'll start with education, science and technology in emerging countries. You see, as we talk about an international forum here where you have experts and policymakers from India, Syria, Algeria coming to study in St. Petersburg international relations. And it shows in your study in non-proliferation that global issues such as disarmament and non-proliferation shouldn't be the affairs of only a handful of countries, and the developed one and the nuclear weapon countries. So, but you guys are in a field that is more complex because you're dealing and you're studying non-proliferation, but you will soon realize when you start working for organizations like the CTBT, the IEA, or OPCW, or any other international organization that deals with disarmament and non-proliferation, you will soon realize that you need science to accompany the policy that you're trying to make. So how do you get people, not only in your countries here, but in the developing world, to have the background in science and policy that will help them to make decisions for their national authorities or for the country they're working for, especially when the countries have to discuss those issues at the Security Council or at the UN General Assembly. So, what we've done, there's a word that is coming in fashion today, which is capacity building. But you can only build capacity through cooperation, and that leads me to your second question. We have to cooperate in a way where we help smaller countries, not the traditional one, in the non-traditional field. Because if you take Burkina Faso, you mentioned my country, why would somebody from Burkina Faso come here and then give you a lecture in non-proliferation? This is something that is very far from the topic and the day-to-day work of my country. I'm coming from a tiny little country that hardly knows what's about nuclear weapon or non-proliferation or disarmament because we have other priorities. But it's due to cooperation, it's due to capacity building that I found myself to have studied science in a field that was different than non-proliferation, and being now in the non-proliferation field where I can come and then talk to you about not only my own experience, but what I'm learning in exchanging with experienced diplomats and being in the international fora to be able to discuss those issues. And schools and classes like yourself can help in that field because students from Syria, students from India, when they go back, they will talk about their experience here and the exchanges that they have with the different and international students in this field. And that's how we can build capacity back home. And that's what is the beauty in international relations, in multilateral diplomacy. Emerging countries should soon realize that the work they're doing domestically, regionally, should be projected to global issues. And global issues today, the key in global issue is non-proliferation and disarmament. We can talk about refugee, we can talk about humanity, we can talk about whatever you name it, climate change, it's all good. But I mean, it takes a country to drop a bomb somewhere so that we destroy everything in our planet. And that's why non-proliferation and disarmament are so critical and such important issue today that we shouldn't see them only as issues of Russia, issue of France, issues of China, issues of UK, but the issues of the whole planet. Because disarmament and non-proliferation depend, and that's what will make our world a peaceful place. When I go to Africa, people often tell me, but Mr. Zerbo, why did you go to work for an organization like the CTBT? I mean, this is far from your priority. We're not interested in this. But I often tell them, if you don't have peace, how can you move on with development? We need peace for development. We need stability for development. We need to build capacity. We need to create an environment that is stable and secure to all of us so that we can work together and then have global issue be part of our daily work. And this is what I can say. I don't know if I've answered your question. That's what I can say to two of your questions. Thank you.
Yes. Some more questions, colleagues? Yep.
So my name is Harshad Pujari. I'm from India. I study in Professor Pavlov's class. I have two questions actually. You said Pakistan is willing to sign the treaty. If Pakistan is willing to sign the treaty, what's stopping India from doing it? And my second question is, you said it is possible in our generation to entirely stop using nuclear weapons. Now, if we come to Israel, it has most volatile relationship with other Middle Eastern countries. So why would they give up their nuclear weapons? That's the only thing protecting them.
If we come to the second part, if you come to which country?
I'm from India.
Yeah. You said no. You said who is...
Pakistan is willing to sign the treaty.
Yeah.
So what's stopping India? That's my first question. And my second question is, Israel has volatile relationship with other Middle Eastern countries.
Other?
Middle Eastern countries.
Yeah.
So why do you think they will give up their nuclear weapons?
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. I'll take a second question and then...
Good morning, my name is Ekaterina. I'm a graduate student of Strategic and Arms Control Studies, and I have a question. During the debates at the nuclear weapons ban negotiations, a question of inclusion prohibition on testing in the treaty was one of the most controversial, because some delegations considered it could undermine the CTBT. So I would like to know your opinion. How could the ban treaty influence the CTBT if it once enters into force?
Okay. Pakistan and India. What I did say is that Pakistan, being an observer to the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, puts them in a step ahead compared to India's position. When, as an expert from India, you will agree with me that, domestically, the issue has always been, if India doesn't, Pakistan will not do it. And if Pakistan doesn't, India will not do it. And this is why I was talking about having everyone in the same room and then signing at the same time. But when I look at Pakistan coming as an observer to the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, I'm tempted to tell to the Pakistanis, move forward to show the leadership in this region and see what India will do. Nothing should stop you from ratifying or signing and ratifying the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. If you believe that this treaty contributes to your national security, you should be able to take the leadership to move forward. And that's why when people talk about the 8 remaining countries, they say, no, US should ratify first, China should ratify first before you can move. And that's what people bring the notion of 800-pound gorilla and 150-pound gorilla. So jokingly, I often say, no, there's no 800-pound gorilla or 150, they're all gorillas. We just want all of them to ratify the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. So, why Pakistan doesn't move? They will say it's because of India. But where I have hope, when I look at my Twitter account, I have more followers from India and Pakistan than any other group. That's a good sign. And when I look at the youth group for the CTBT, we have more Indian and Pakistanis than any other region in the world. For me, this is positive. It's positive because your generation, the young people, are looking at this treaty and other arms control treaty and saying to themselves, hey guys, this world is different. The position that put our elders in a situation where they say, we don't believe in this treaty because we don't think it's a treaty that is balanced enough. We don't think that a group could have weapon and a group shouldn't have weapon. We don't believe in that dilemma or that double standard in terms of perception, that this world is different than the world at the time of the negotiation. What we need to do today is not to say and think about what happened in the past, it's to think about the future. And because the future belongs to you, you can only help us to move forward in those issues. If I take you, if you go back to your country, let's say if in 5-10 years you are the foreign minister of India, because you've seen a different world in a different way of negotiation, you'll be more amenable to consider international treaties like the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty than somebody who is in his retirement age today. Why? Because you're looking at things in a different way. Why? Because you probably talk and exchange more with Pakistanis than your predecessors. Because the time those were not talking together, the separation between India and Pakistan was too fresh. It is my hope that as time goes, those will be things that will be smoothened in a way where you can hold your Pakistani colleagues' hand and then work together towards achieving the signature or ratification of the CTBT or any other agreement that you guys will have. And this is why Pakistan has proposed to India that you have a bilateral agreement, not the agreement, a unilateral agreement not to test, but a bilateral. It's a good sign. It means that people are starting to work together. We have our Science and Technology Conference. When I sit there and then see young Indian and Pakistani exchanging and doing a simulation of negotiation between the two countries about the CTBT, it is encouraging. And that's what gives me hope. And that's why I'm not putting country against each other, but I'm putting country together, because your generation will help us move forward better than we can think of. So you talked about Middle East country. Why would India and Pakistan give up their weapon? No? Israel. Okay. You talk about Israel, why Israel will give up, why others will give up their weapon if Israel doesn't. You see, I wish I could answer this question the best possible, because this is a question that comes often wherever I go. People tell me there is a perception of a double standard. But I visited Israel several times, and I had the pleasure and honor to sit for about 40 minutes with Prime Minister Netanyahu, where I was talking about the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. That was the time the GCPOA was just concluded. At that time, one message that I gave was, why didn't the international community include the CTBT in the GCPOA? Why? Because Iran says, and yesterday again it was confirmed by the Speaker of the Parliament, that the fatwa doesn't allow Iran to develop nuclear weapon. The fatwa by the leader, the religious leader, say no, Iran should not develop nuclear weapon. He said it's not only nuclear weapon, it's all weapon of mass destruction. So based on this, I said, but why didn't you include the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty so that they ratify? But you know, you guys are in multilateral diplomacy. People want leverage. If you didn't include it in the beginning, why do you want to include it when the agreement is about to be signed? And also, before you tell your neighbor that his doorstep is dirty, you have to clean yours. You cannot have your doorstep dirty and then tell the others to clean his. So what we need, those who are going for the negotiation have to show what we say in France, patte blanche. If I'm clean, I can tell others to be clean. And that's one of the difficulty right now in arms control and non-proliferation. But we cannot bank on this and then say to ourselves that there's no way forward. We need leadership, we need understanding, we need confidence building measure regionally and internationally as we move to achieve a more stable and peaceful world. Someone needs to take leadership. We say the world lacks leadership today, but the leadership will come from you guys. Because you guys are coming with a fresh mind. You will not be coming with the baggage of those negotiations, with the baggage of the fresh separation of India and Pakistan, with the baggage of all the fight in the Middle East. You'll come with fresh mind because as you sit here, you talk to people from around the world. Those from the past haven't had that luck, that chance, that opportunity where they can talk and exchange with people from around the world and then try to achieve a better environment for themselves. And that's what gives me hope. And that's why I rely on young people. I rely on youth for CTBT and youth for non-proliferation and disarmament. And this is what I bank on. So, young people in Israel will probably say it's about time that we join certain agreement. We join the Chemical Weapon Convention. We join the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty because we want a better world for our future generation, for the future generation. I believe in this. It takes new people and young people to come out and then say, we want a different world. I mean, if you look at the election in Austria, it's a 30-year-old guy who might be the Chancellor of Austria. I was reading today in the news, they say, because he came with a different mindset. He said, I want the world to be different than what I've been seeing. And people want to buy on this. I'm not saying that every single one of you will be president of your country, but I'm saying you can come up with new ideas that can help change this world, and that's what we need from you. So the Prohibition Treaty and the CTBT. I've often said to this that one should not be at the expense of the other. People tell me, if you have a Prohibition Treaty, do you need a CTBT? I mean, if you go back to my little story about a toddler, I say for the Prohibition Treaty to be effective and to be strong, you need to have dealt with pending agreement like the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty and even the Fissile Material Cut-off Treaty. So does it mean that I'm against the Prohibition Treaty? I wouldn't say so. When I say this, people say, why? I say, why? Why? Because some treaties have started and they need to be taken, their effectiveness. We need to finish what we started. We need to finish the CTBT to be strong on our feet as we seek a world free of nuclear weapons. The Prohibition Treaty is, in its ideal, is great, but we need to give ourselves the means to achieve that. Can we achieve it? Can you take weapon from a country or weapon from the planet if those who have the weapon are not contributing and cooperating with you? You'll agree with me that this is impossible. So the way to get those to contribute is to have them to agree on pending treaties like the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty and then the Fissile Material Cut-off Treaty, and also to consider ways to make the implementation of the Iran deal as successful as possible for the civil society in Iran to believe that international and multilateral diplomacy works. Because that's one of the problems that the Speaker of the Parliament told me yesterday. How do I convince civil society? How do I convince my parliament? Those who didn't want this Iran deal, and today we're saying that it might fall apart. How do I convince them to go for other arms control and non-proliferation treaty? This is a challenge, and that's a difficult part. And that's why we have to find a way to agree, to disagree, or disagree to agree as we move forward. And that's what I can say about the Prohibition Treaty and the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. Thank you.
Some more questions.
My name is Solomina Daria. I'm a fourth-year student, and I would like to thank Dr. Zerbo for his very inspirational speech. And I've got just one question. We all know that terrorism nowadays is one of the main threats the world has to face. Is it possible, in your opinion, that some terrorist group get some access to nuclear weapons? And if so, how the organization is supposed to stand against it? Thank you.
Okay.
One more.
One more.
There is another microphone. Just a moment.
But this works too. Hi, I'm Anthony Constantini. I'm from the United States. Thank you for coming to speak to us. I just had two quick questions. One, you mentioned there's a discrepancy between the number of countries that have ratified the treaty and have signed it. Do you place a premium on getting more people to ratify the treaty to pressure remaining countries to sign it? Or do you place a premium on getting more signatures? Or is it anything you can take? And then my second question revolves actually, we've seen with the Trump administration recently kind of showing that the Iran deal may have some trouble in the future. And my question is, this was successful in clearly slowing down or pausing the Iranian nuclear program. But at the same time, the way it was structured, it allows a country like the United States or any of the other signatures to potentially unravel it unilaterally. Would you support a hypothetical, say, signature from Egypt in the future on a deal similar to the Iran deal, which could be unraveled by any country that's involved in it? Or is it once somebody signs, do you want them to clearly state they will sign, there's no chance that they will pull out regardless of what any other country may have done in the initial deal? Thank you very much.
The first question on terrorists getting access to nuclear weapon. This has been one of the fear and the threat of our time. Terrorism is one of the biggest challenges that the international community has to face today. And I said it so because, including Burkina Faso, we're facing terrorist attack. And we seem to be far from what's happening in the global picture. But I mean, if terrorists can go down to small countries like Burkina and then perpetrate this type of attack, it means that nothing and nobody is free from this type of consideration. So if they were to possess or to access nuclear weapon, it would have been a catastrophe for the world, because a terrorist, he has no limit. Because when somebody doesn't fear death, what can you do against somebody who is ready to die? The minute somebody is ready to die, there's nothing you can do than suffering from what he can do to you. So how do we get terrorists not to get access? I think it's to probably try and improve leadership and multilateral diplomacy so that we can get closer to the countries that govern those terrorist groups for them to come to reality. You will tell me, but why haven't we managed? If you take a country like Pakistan, where Pakistan is and has suffered from terrorists for so long, sometimes people ask me the question, what if terrorist groups take over the power in Pakistan? What would happen? Because Pakistan seems to be considered as a nuclear weapon country. It could happen. God forbid. It's not what we want, but it could happen. And that's something that the international community should work together to not allow this, to not allow people who are not in that set of stability to access or to possess nuclear weapon. That's one thing. Accessing and taking over a country that possesses nuclear weapon. But your question goes more in line with what if they manage to develop nuclear weapon, or what if they get support from a country that is developing nuclear weapon and then they possess nuclear weapon, like the Islamic State, for instance. But thank God, the Islamic State seems to be going in shambles. I think the last city seems to have been taken now by the international community and the coalition, and that's a good news. But it is true, and that's why we have the Fissile Material Kind of Treaty, is to make sure that the transport, distribution, and control of fissile material that could serve for developing nuclear weapon is controlled in a way where wherever it goes, we know where it's coming from and where it goes. And that's why the FMCT is so important. And that's why the former president of France has said France's priority is not only the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, but it's the FMCT as well. But how do we control those material? You heard the Nuclear Security Summit was meant to achieve that. But the Nuclear Security Summit didn't have the full buy-in of Russia, because Russia had some concern about the Nuclear Security Summit. And I had some concern as well, because I felt that if we wanted to deal with nuclear security as a whole, we have to take the whole framework of non-proliferation and disarmament in a holistic manner. Because if you go to Africa, who knows the difference between the IEA and the CTBT, and who knows the difference between the Chemical Weapon Convention and the Biological Weapon Convention and the Nuclear Weapon Convention? Nobody knows that difference, because they all see them as weapons of mass destruction. And that's why, unless and until we see nuclear weapon and weapon of mass destruction in a holistic manner, we'll be able to get the buy-in, the contribution, the control that is necessary from smaller country to bigger country for us to achieve the control that is necessary to not let the product and material to flow around for them to be able to develop nuclear weapon. But for terrorists to develop nuclear weapon, until and unless they benefit from the contribution of a country that has it, it will be pretty hard. Trust me, I visited the Nevada test site, I visited Semipalatinsk. This is not an easy thing to do. And that's why it is still surprising to see a country like North Korea being in the possession of a nuclear weapon capability. But that's our challenge, the challenge of our time, and then we'll all have to work to make sure that this doesn't happen. So the question on the signature, how are we looking for more signature and what? You know, during my term, when I started as executive secretary, I said to myself, we have 183, we had 181 or whatever signature, or 179. I said to myself, why should I focus on getting 193 or 195 if the 8 remaining don't ratify? Because the entry into force of the CTBT depends on those 8 remaining countries. And among the 8, the 5 that have not signed. And that's what I say, the 8 should be my focus. Maybe I will spend my 2 terms or less or more and not being able to get any of them. But by talking to you guys like we do today, I will put the seeds in you for you to do your part for those 8 remaining countries to move forward with the entry into force of the CTBT. And that will be my contribution during my term. The work that we do together today, the Youth Forum for CTBT, the discussion that we have openly, because I talk freely. I'm not a trained diplomat like you guys where, you think 20 times before you say what you have to. I say what I think, and then I try to do what I want to do. And in talking to you guys, I want to put in you the seed for you to understand that the CTBT is part of the overall framework in non-proliferation and disarmament, and we need to get that finished. We need to finish what we started more than 20 years ago. So I'm focusing on the 8 remaining countries. I'm focusing on the DPRK as well, because for our 20 years anniversary, I was told, why do you want to invite North Korea? But I did invite them. They didn't come, but I did invite them. But why shouldn't I invite them? How can you ignore a country that you want to sign and ratify your treaty for it to enter into force? Because somebody doesn't like that? I don't think so, because I'm paid to get the treaty into force. I'm paid to get the technical and political means for this treaty to be effective. Therefore, I shouldn't ignore or exclude any country which ratification is necessary for its entry into force. It is true when they ask me, would you be ready to go to North Korea? Yes, if you give me a return ticket, I will go. And if you want to come with me, we go together. So I'm not excluding or ignoring any country. I'm ready to work with anybody which ratification is necessary for the entry into force of the treaty. I'm not saying I'm ignoring other signatures. The more they come, the more universal the treaty is. But the treaty is nearly universal already, because you have more than 90% of the international community and more than 90% of the countries that have signed and or ratified the treaty. It's about time that we get it into force. So your other question was pulling out. Pulling out is what multilateral diplomacy is all about. It's how strong we treasure and value the work that you guys are doing today. If you're doing international relations, is to be able to be part of a gathering in the international community where you can agree on things that are important, not only for your country, but for the international community. Because all of you in this study, your goal is to make the world better for you and better for the generation to come. The minute you put that vision in your head, international agreements are beyond your national agreement. And that's the beauty of multilateral diplomacy. Multilateral diplomacy is to look at that vision where we think that the world is what matters. We have to do our part to make what matters for the rest of the world, for the international community. The minute you put that, you cannot be thinking about pulling out of an international agreement. You have a vision, you have the passion, and then you want to achieve something for the international community, not for you. Because you know that with social media today, your world is not the United States. My world is not Burkina Faso. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting here or standing here talking to you. It's because the world is bigger and smaller at the same time, where Burkina Faso and United States and China and India can meet in a room and talk about the same issue. And that's the beauty of our world. And that's the beauty of multilateral diplomacy. And that's why I think there should be no room for countries alone to pull out of an agreement that they've signed. The agreement, when you sign and when you agree on an international forum, it's because you think that this agreement is beyond yourself. The minute you say that is beyond yourself, even if you want to pull out, you think about your neighbor. You're sitting next to somebody from India. You might be sitting next to somebody from Iran. If you want to do something different, you say to yourself, hey, if I do it, what is the person on my left thinking? If I do it, what is the person on my right thinking? Will we be able to talk when we come out and have coffee together? Because you guys have coffee together, you can agree to move forward. And that's the beauty of your world, and that's why I believe more in you than I believe in myself. Thank you.
Dear colleagues, dear students, maybe last 2 or 3 questions, because we have to finish gradually our session. Please, last 2, or how many questions we have left? Yes, please. There in the end, one here and one there, right? Okay.
I'm Alessia. I'm a student on Arms Control and Strategic Studies master program. CTBT is one of the most important elements of international nuclear non-proliferation regime. And question is, how can you describe the role of CTBT or Preparatory Commission in involving the discussion of international nuclear non-proliferation regime countries which are not members of non-proliferation treaty?
There was a question there.
Okay, so my name is Miklas Zvar. I'm from Slovakia. I'm the second course student. And my question is, as I understood, the CTBTO is organization to prevent the nuclear wars, as I understood, right? That's the kind of first question. And the second one, if the CTBTO have some science and technology...
Could you please repeat your question a little bit louder and not so fast? Because acoustics, someone... Not...
Okay, so the first question is, the CTBTO is organization to prevent the nuclear war. And the second one is, if the CTBTO has technology and science, I don't know, the offices or parts of organization, how does they work on the other sides of nuclear weapons? If they are like trying to figure out some nuclear engines or something connected to space, or is this organization connected only to prevent wars? That's all.
Okay, the question here about the CTBT and then countries that are not party to the NPT. I'll use one example. Israel is party to the CTBT and not party to the NPT. That's one. And when I met Prime Minister Netanyahu, he said, we believe more in the CTBT than anything else. But I knew what he was talking about. I'm not trying to justify why a country can be part of the NPT and a country not being part of the NPT and being part of other arms control treaty. You leading me to the point whereby I think that we need to see the global picture of non-proliferation and disarmament holistically. Why I say holistically is we should say, what is our goal? Because the goal of all those agreements and treaties and whatever is one day to have a world free of nuclear weapon. And why we want a world free of nuclear weapon? Because we've experienced Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Because that's what people can see, and that's why you will see in a movie, or if you have a chance to visit Nagasaki or Hiroshima. If we didn't have the experience of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we would have heard about the damaging effect of nuclear weapon without seeing it. And unfortunately, what I've seen in multilateral diplomacy in our world today, we are hardly able to prevent crises. Crises happen and then we deal with them. But in nuclear non-proliferation, we have to be careful. Because it's not like the chemical weapon that what happened in Syria, and then all of a sudden they ask Syria to sign the convention, and then to say, okay, we try to eliminate all chemical weapons on the planet. An error or a mistake in nuclear weapon is not sustainable today. Why? Because nuclear weapons today are 100 times more powerful than the weapon that we had 70 years ago in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So we have to be more careful and more mindful of the consequence of the use or even the development of nuclear weapon before we can do anything. Therefore, any small step in the direction of our ultimate goal, which is a world free of nuclear weapon, I take it as an important step. Each step, be it smaller, we should treasure it, because we've seen that any movement in that direction has been hard. Otherwise, 72 years ago, we had Hiroshima, and the Ibakuchas in Japan were starting already their movement against nuclear weapon. But more than 70 years later, we still have nuclear weapon. So it's not an easy thing. We hope to achieve it one day, and your generation might be able to. But if we start saying why you didn't sign this and why you didn't sign this, I don't sign, like I was talking to my Indian friend just now, we won't be moving, because you say, okay, you know, why your shirt is red and mine is pink, why your shirt is white and mine is whatever. So it's becoming difficult. I often say, if we're all dressed in white for this conference. All of us in white. Okay? Whoever comes in the room, if he wears a black dress, is different. Okay? But we will see him. But if he wears a gray shirt like yours, he can hide a little bit. So it's the same for nuclear weapon. Okay? Why would we be trying to build a world where we all in white shirts and then we'll let people come with black shirts in our room? We have to tell them, if you have a black shirt outside, as you try to come here, wear a shirt that will be fading in a way where it's get closer to the white so that you become part of us. So this is the type of analogy that I try to make to say, wherever you go, you have to adapt yourself to the reality of the room, the reality of the moment. And the moment is what? The moment is we want a world free of nuclear weapons. We should all work towards that. Whatever can help us to move in that direction, we should buy it. And this is how I see the issue of non-proliferation and disarmament. So now turning into preventing, you say, I wish that the CTBT was to prevent war. I think if we were seen like that already, we would have made a good step towards the entry into force. One expert at Stanford, Zig Hecker, told me, he said, look, Lassina, the problem with your treaty is because people don't see the damage of testing. They see the damage of weapon. And that's why the prohibition of nuclear weapon got so much attention than the prohibition of nuclear testing. Because the testing is too far from the reality. Because when you hear testing in North Korea, people sit and say, okay, yeah, it happened in that part of the world. It doesn't do any damage to us. So they are too far from the reality of nuclear testing, and they're too far from the consequences, that is, developing nuclear weapon and being in a position where more countries can proliferate by trying to do the same like North Korea. And that's a difficult challenge. But having said this, if our role can contribute to preventing war and contribute to preventing the development of nuclear weapon, and if that is understandable, and if you can help us portray this message and distribute this message and pass this message through social media so that people link the development or possible development of nuclear weapons through testing to the possible use of nuclear weapon, we will make a huge step towards understanding that will lead to the entry into force of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. And also, and that was your question, nuclear energy. You know, when I hear nuclear energy, the International Atomic Energy deals with the peaceful use of nuclear energy. But the International Atomic Energy is 150 meters from my office. We share the same set of buildings. But when you come to Vienna, and then you come for an IEA conference, you go to the IEA, they don't even tell you that the CTBT is next door. And I guess we do the same thing. But we need your generation to say that when you go to Vienna, you want to see the scope of all aspects of non-proliferation and disarmament, from peaceful use to counter-terrorism at UNODC, and then to counter-testing at the CTBT. That gives you the broader scope of what the international community is trying to achieve. And then you will understand what the IEA is doing. You will understand that the CTBT is not against the use of nuclear energy, but that the international community has created another framework where they deal with atom for peace or energy for peace, and that we deal with no testing for developing nuclear weapons. And if we connect the dots and put those two together, we would have given you that bigger scope that leads to what I say, looking at non-proliferation and disarmament in a holistic manner. And this is what we have to do. This world, your time, cannot suffer from stovepiping. We have to connect the dots and get things together so that we can achieve that world that we want, a world free of nuclear weapons. Thank you.
Dear Dr. Zerbo, thank you very much for your really interesting, informative intervention, which has been especially encouraging and motivating to our students. So, dear colleagues, I think it's time to thank dear Dr. Zerbo with long, sincere applause from us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. You are welcome to our school and to St. Petersburg at any time. And dear colleagues, dear friends, before we close our session, if our dear guest doesn't mind, I would invite everyone here on the stage for the group photo. This would be a good idea and good memory for all of us. Please come here.
Students of strategic studies, please stay after. Thank you very much.
Please, дорогие студенты, подойдите, пожалуйста, для группового фото, кто не услышал.